object, there can be that. And so I started looking in into reflection more, and sort of started learning more about distortion, which was not a direction I could have ever seen myself going into at all. So that was really awesome that it surprised me in that way.
Yeah, and we'll have to continue to talk about that idea of distortion later. Yeah, because that becomes an important theme. Beck, how about you?
Yeah, totally. So I applied 2 times. So the first application, everything was kind of difficult, you know. Looking back on it, I kind of had like a messy and unclear proposal. It was a little bit passive in its tone. My image list, that's become a lot more important than I thought it was. So having something that's really cohesive, right? And then also the quality of your installation images, that's a really big thing. And then an overly designed resume, that was one thing that was also somewhat difficult for me to get over, just, you know, cutting out everything that doesn't need to be there. But yeah, so then that second time around, I got a lot cleaner, focused, and more direct in my tone. Every time I do revisions between each of my mentors, at least like 3 times, right? And then I also reached out to prior residents, so Emily Gordon, Anthony Clementi, for them to also revise the proposals. So yeah, and then where I thought my art was gonna go, I thought it was gonna be a lot more video based, a lot more projection and sculpture, but now it's gone a lot more towards kind of like film photography, bookmaking, poetry, etc.
So it sounds like both of you, in your proposal, you said one thing, and now you're actually kind of doing something different, or it's visually becoming something different. It might still have the core of what you had anticipated, but its outcome has been really changed. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And why do you think that happened? Like what happened in the work based on the proposal? How did its trajectory start to slowly shift? And that kind of gets into our second question. Discuss how you started to shape your research in the summer and fall, and what were those goals?
Should I continue on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so at the core of it, my kind of thesis that I'm running with, that's still the same. But just kind of over the fall, I kind of took a break from doing art stuff over the summer, you know, big summer.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of step away for a little bit, so then that way you're a lot more refreshed when you come back in the fall. But yeah, I suppose for me, I'm really slow and I'm really reactive. So when I start kind of building things, doing prototyping, it just kind of it's a slow buildup that you just kind of got to flow with the process, I suppose. And the more you kind of read and research, the more you're intrigued by certain things.
Mm-hmm. There's a question in the chat from Eliza. If you are already foreseeing a shift in your ideas, should you also mention those possible shifts in your proposal? Excuse me. Any thoughts, either one of you? Yeah, SAiR, go ahead.
I would say maybe if you think there's going to be shifts, maybe just try changing your proposal at first to sort of fit those shifts, because I think it's almost impossible to predict certain things that will change. For example, for me, one of the biggest things that changed was I was primarily going to rely on video recordings, but because of the space that I'm in, that's part of what changed it. And comparatively to the size of what things I was doing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Beck and then Sarah, can you each kind of talk about what the core idea was for your proposal and then how that started to take shape in the fall?
Yeah. So I guess the core kind of like thesis proposed idea in my proposal was an exploration of kind of borderlines and the ambiguity of borderlines. Talking about kind of like a debris that builds up, a living debris. And I mean, that can be twisted and turned in so many different ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that was part of the success of the proposal, was that it was maybe specific enough, but also broad enough that it allowed for it to change and morph?
Yeah. There's kind of like a sweet spot that you can hit there where if you can stick with like a solid core concept, you can still bend and manipulate the things that build up around it, right?
Yeah. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, and I would say that that reigns true for me as well, because the way that my concept shifted wasn't it sort of started off as I would be seeing through, similar to VR, I would be seeing through a screen very up close, and that would be sort of the way I would be seeing the world. And how do I paint with that? But then and that it was sort of rooted in this sort of being able to see myself doing the thing, so I could step out of myself in a way.
Mm.
And that actually it became true still, because I became really interested in this reflective material. So it became a way of seeing myself doing the thing, but in a very different way. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, Beck, you said that you took a break over the summer. I think a lot of people took a break over the summer because it was so distinct and a little crazy, the pandemic and the riots, etc. Sarah, how about you? How did you start thinking about um, your work and your proposal? And did you work on it during the summer, or did you hit the ground running in the fall?
So I guess the most concrete part of my proposal was that I knew I was going to build 4 feet by 8 foot panels. And so because I knew that, I put that off, and I sort of just dug into reading, and I read a lot over the summer. That reading didn't stop though. I did continue some of that based on, like, I think one of the great things is that you can start reading books that say you get an introduction to in your classes, and you can actually read them more and sort of figure out certain parts that way.
Yeah, and what was the impetus for reading? Why was reading a vehicle for your research?
Well, it was partially because it was definitely in my proposal that reading would be part of it, but also I think it's important, if part of what I was doing was essentially to step outside of myself. I think that, looking at people's vantage points about seeing the world is very important, and sort of learning to listen and
Mm.
and sort of being able to see others' perspectives on key parts. For example, I'll just shout out Paul Virilio um, said some really important things for me about speed in various books that he wrote, and that was very important in my research. And I think part of the reason why you can't predict changes in your proposal is because you will read things or you will research, and that changes maybe how you see the world too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what I hear from both of you is that you wrote a proposal that did get at the heart of some of the things that you wanted to address and was presented in a kind of clear way. So there were particularities in it. It wasn't vague, but it also allowed for a kind of flexibility so that you didn't feel hemmed in, right, by the proposal, because that's what it is. It's a proposal. So yeah, I think that also comes down to good writing too. And so what I also hear in there is that there's a kind of process to writing this to get closer to the kinds of things that you're interested in. And it's not just about writing about how my art addresses technology, right? I mean, I think it's got to be more than just this issue of technology. I don't think the faculty are going to bite on that if you don't have interesting work to back it up. Let's move on to the next question. So what do you think your goals were in the fall, and how are they different now? So I'm kind of moving into, I'm sort of on 3, but I wanna maybe do a 2.5 question, where what happened between the fall and kind of right now, because you're just about at the edge of exhibiting this work. So what's happened between the fall and now? What could, if somebody got this, if somebody listening right now got this, what would you advise them to do during the fall and into the beginning of the spring semester? Like what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say during the fall, that was like all purely research for me up until maybe the last few weeks. Then I started kind of prototyping, but I think maybe in
Beck, can you define what you're saying by research? What did you do in particular during that time?
it was pretty similar to Sarah, a lot of reading, and then also just kind of casual observation. A lot of my research kind of just comes from daily life, right? So
can you share with us some of the things that you read?
Yeah, so got them right here.
Cool.
So for me, I react a lot to poetry. So this is a Leslie Scalapino book, right? Yeah. This is a poetry anthology by Bernard Venet.
Nice.
If I pronounce that right, it's probably French.
Probably.
But interestingly enough, this one gets a lot into like math almost. It's a lot of numbers and a lot of like numerical kind of rhythms almost. Yeah. I guess, but more importantly, besides those, I got this book, which is the first book written by an AI, right? It's called Won the Road. And it's this car that kind of had all these different machines and systems hooked up to it that would record observations, sounds, timestamps, and it would just write all of these recordings from its little camera on top of the car, right? So, I mean, eventually all those weird kind of disjointed, somewhat poetic books just kind of merge together, and you get some concepts out of it.
Yeah. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I also have some of the books with me. I mean, there are others. I'll name a few of the other ones too. I have Being in the World, which is a commentary on Heidegger's Being in Time. So it sort of goes into that because Heidegger uses some very complicated language sometimes, and especially in English, it can be hard to understand. So, and then I have The Road Less Traveled, which was a really great book that you recommended. I believe you recommended this book to me, and I think it's really good for people to, if you're curious about sort of responsibility and accountability, those sort of things. That's a great book for that. I have the Relevance of the Beautiful by Gadamer. I have Mythologies by Barthes. And I would say like another one of the most critical books that I read that I don't have with me is The Inner Game of Tennis, actually, which I think we actually read part of it in one of my classes. And I found it really important what it was saying. So I felt the need to read the whole thing, and it really applied to what I was doing. So,
yeah, we read that in senior seminar.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so you've got all this information, right? You're sort of kind of rolling in it and enjoying it, challenging it. How does it start to get embedded into or embodied into art? How does that happen? What do you start doing? SAiR, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I actually started working on my 4 paintings right away in the fall because I knew that there was going to be this sort of urgency that I would have to abide by, because painting and drawing, and then especially in a sculptural way, can take a lot of time, especially when layers become part of it. So, and also, I guess I sort of opened up to also trying to find ways to distance my work, and having to actually take photos and rely on that, and cropping and sort of looking into certain spots, and then finding sort of ways that they allow for openness, but also say what I need them to say.
So when you say distance yourself from them, what can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I've actually worked in the same room the whole time, and it's the residence room, which is pretty small. And the paintings are really big. They're like walls. So it caused me to really sort of contain myself in a way, sort of really collapsed everything onto itself. But I think that helped me see sort of relationships with what I was doing, having them so close together.
Yeah, that sounds like a Francis Bacon sort of way of working, because his studio was also really quite small. So interesting. How about you, Beck? How is that research now starting to get embodied into your art?
Yeah, so talking especially about that AI book, right? That kind of gave me a lot of inspiration for the formatting, if I'm going to present my poetry, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the fall, it was a lot of writing for me. So then by when the time this semester came around, it was really important to just get all that condensed, get it into the book. I'm making books. I don't know if I mentioned that at all yet, but yeah, so similar to how this book is somewhat formatted, right? I printed out my whole entire book on receipt paper. So it similarly mimics a kind of mechanical autonomy that you could find with these kind of AI scripting machines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it hard for either one of you to let go of your, like, the proposal itself and how you sort of envisioned it, or was it really natural to let go of bits and pieces of the proposal and just say, yeah, I need to make this now, and not, I'm going to let go of that other thing?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a really kind of natural evolution to this.
Yeah.
I'm definitely still revisiting and rethinking about the things I put in my proposal. They're kind of being recycled in a way.
So in some ways, the proposal continues to be a source for how to think about things. So it hasn't just been thrown away, but
No.
it's revisited. How about you, SAiR?
Yeah, I would say that I used the ideas as a sort of core jumping off point, especially for content, to what I was painting. And I would say that although like there were some things I was certain about, even it kept changing. Like there was many times where it sort of took small steps away, rather than just maybe like one giant leap away from the proposal.
Yeah.
And it was sort of, in a way, I guess, reactionary to what I was learning. It was me sort of becoming more specific, I think, about certain things.
Yeah, right. Because embodiment always has specificity. So you can't sort of get away from that to some regard. So yeah, so now that the exhibition, the student artist residency exhibition is nigh, Yeah, where are you with your work? What worked out? What did you have to let go of?
I'll go first. I think that, I'm really happy I did have a sense of urgency in the beginning because, life happens and life is hard and COVID and things happen. So you always have to, be aware that if you put in the time while you're doing well or while things are going well, it will be better in the long run, for when things don't go well, because life is like that. It will always throw you into different directions. And I think that I really had to be fast at the end, and sort of having my mentors see what I'm doing and sort of be able to find maybe things that were working that I didn't realize initially that I thought I would have to change. So, being able to slow down in that way, and having resolutions maybe before I even was aware of them, by having them pointed out to me that there were resolutions there.
Yeah. Okay. Great. How about you, Beck?
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of kind of what Sarah just mentioned. But yeah, now that the show goes up in what, 2 weeks, week and a half, something like that. I'm just waiting on my books to get here from the printers, so that's kind of exciting. Right.
Are either one of you surprised now that you think about what's going to be exhibited? Is there surprise about what? Okay, yeah, I made this proposal last March, April, and now it's exhibition time, and this is what I've come to. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was a huge jump going from the proposal of doing projection-based works now to learning this whole new craft of making books, right? There's a lot of different steps to binding and paper choices and different printers and certain budgeting and what's the right word here? Formatting options, essentially. So yeah, and that comes with a whole different mode of display too, because now you have to kind of figure out how you're going to display these new kind of interesting objects that you haven't quite worked with yet before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, for me, I would say that display too is, I think, the part that really, so even now, it's still kind of surprising to me because I'm sort of displaying them in more of a way that puts the viewer in more specific orientations to the pieces. And that's not a direction I even thought of when making my proposal.
Mm.
But I think it actually is really important to the work, and it does make sense with the proposal too. So I'm really glad that that became part of it.
Do you either one of you feel like there were certain things that were hard to let go of, but you needed to let go of?
Yeah, for me, I held a sort of cynicism toward technology, in many ways, and I had to let go of that. And I think art kind of also requires that too, when you're environmentally conscious in some ways, and finding ways to sort of reuse and just be conscious, but also maintaining a place where you're not super cynical about it, that mistakes can happen and that they're okay.
Yeah. Maybe it's okay to be skeptical, but maybe not cynical.
Yeah, I like that way of putting it.
Okay. And for you, Beck?
Yeah. I think in terms of like having difficulty letting go of some things, I think initially, I mean, I had a little bit of overambition when it came to making these books.
Mm.
Um,
How so?
During, I'd say winter break, so during that in between of research and actually making, I was going to attempt to make every single book by hand, right? I was gonna hand print them in the darkroom and bind them myself.
Wow.
But things can definitely kind of get in the way with that, with school and everything else. So yeah, that was kind of one thing I had to cast out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Catapult out of the possibility pot.
Add something really quick, Professor Lume?
Yeah, please.
One more new thing that I forgot to mention that I just thought of was we're working on building a website too for the residents, and I've beyond having to do that for myself in senior seminar. It's interesting because it's collaborative as well, and sort of being able to continue a distance, because I don't want to reveal the complete process to the viewer through the website. So being able to work in grayscale and things like that, cropping, those are really great, and also helps me see the work too.
Right, in another kind of distancing way, right? It allows for a different kind of vantage point for sure. Great. So really, this is kind of the last question is, what advice do you have for those that are going to apply for this year? What things do you think are really necessary for, potential success? We'll start with you, Sarah.
I would say, read things that challenge you, and be open to change, but also, remain skeptical about the right things. And try to find those things that you think that should be right. For me, I found that love is really essential, and humor, and also being able to see outside of the self and be a part of the external. Like, that's very important. So I would say, be open to listening and be open to change, and understand that there will often be ideas that even contradict each other. And that contradiction can be part of life, and life is weird in that way.
Yes, well stated. How about you, Beck?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that Sarah just made, is definitely being open to how your work changes and how you perceive things. Because I found there's also like a lot of humor that can come out of my work, kind of unironically or ironically. One of the two, I don't know. But and then also, the way I kind of have been viewing the residency this whole time is something that operates outside of regular kind of school, university life. So, kind of more so treat it as a job, dedicate a certain amount of hours to it per week.
Are there, I know that there are probably people listening who are in the process of writing their proposals. So do you have any advice for them about writing the proposals? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I would say try and be as clear and specific as you can be about your ideas. And I think that through doing that, you may even find that your ideas need to change. And that's okay, to be open to that.
Yeah, and the specificity doesn't mean that you're locked into the specificity. It just means that you're trying to be clear about things. Yeah. How about you, Beck?
And then specificity, a direct tone, not kind of a over explanation or over conceptualization of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Get into the process a lot, get into how feasible it is, how it's going to look,
Yeah, can you talk more about that, Beck, in terms of helping the jurors or the panels, the faculty, help see your work via the proposal?
Yeah, someone hinted at it at the beginning with your image list. One way I kind of used my image list was to show a sort of preview of how some of the objects in my proposal may look, because parts of the sculptural works of my proposal were kind of evolutions of my past work, right? Got one right here. One of my kind of canned trash items, right?
Right.
So parts of these were part of my proposal as well. So it was nice for the jurors to be able to see them already photographed in my image list, right?
And so when excuse me, when writing the proposal, how important is it for you to write in such a way so that the work itself that you've made that's in the proposal and the proposal itself talk to each other? How important do you think that is? Like that you're not just merely writing about future work, but that you're also kind of addressing work that you've made in the proposal. How important is that, do you think?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think it's pretty important to address, the history of what you're doing, put it into a context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that by stating like where you're at or where you've come from can show your potential for change as well. And it also helps you see your change by having that sort of written out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I hear is that there's a kind of, in that proposal, there's this kind of self-awareness of what you're doing, and you contextualize it, and then you might start to spring forward towards a possibility, right? A could, not a should, but a could.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that the proposal too reveals it to you as you write it. It can make you more specific in your own understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Sarah, that that the writing itself, the process of writing might help make it become revealed. I think that's a really important thing. I know that when I've written proposals, it is an opportunity to really dream about what it is that you'd really like to do. And it's based in the context of what you're doing now and what's the potential in the future. So that's excellent. Yeah, I really love that. In terms of images, do you have suggestions about images that you used? Obviously, you want them to be the highest quality, best lit kind of work that you can do, but in terms of like what you submitted and how it related to the proposal, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about how you select. I mean, obviously you've got lots of work to choose from, but you chose very specific pieces. So could you talk a little bit about the selection process for your images? Go ahead, Sarah.
For me, I've made a lot of horrible work, so I guess in that way, it narrowed it down a lot. And I was sort of trying to just figure out, what work was the best. And also, if there were any direct connections to my proposal, I didn't find too many, but there were some where I could see that maybe someone would see that. So I thought those were important to include as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about painting a lot in my proposal, painting and drawing specifically. So I made sure to include those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. How about you, Beck?
Yeah, so I think in terms of order and what kind of shots that you have, you want to kind of establish a narrative as the jurors kind of scroll through it. So starting with larger installation shots, getting a few of those done in, say, the 209 gallery, going down to more detail shots from, the photo studio. Hoover's working that right now. And then also kind of a chronological order, starting with your newest work first, going down into your older works.
Was that a required part of the application, the chronology?
I don't know if it's required, but it's kind of implied.
Okay.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't have the application in front of me.
Yeah.
I know sometimes applications can, like in terms of writing a proposal, in terms of that order that you talked about, Beck, there might be a particular piece that embodies that the best, and that's what you might want to show first, right? Because it gives the viewer, juror, oh, this is what they're after. Oh, this embodies the larger theme or themes. I mean, that
Yeah.
seems like a potential, right?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that too. You can bend and manipulate it however you want, definitely.
Yeah. And I would say, Sarah, to your point, sometimes our best work isn't always the work that we need in the proposal, right? Because if it's just a series of our best work, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to help us in the proposal and ultimately doing that. So I do see some chatter. So Harrison asks, how much did you use any of your foundation work in your application?
By foundation work, does that mean drawing and painting 1 and 2? Is that what foundations is? Well, if it is, I did not use any work that I hadn't made prior to. Yeah, no, I did not. I had made a lot of work beyond then that was much better. That I felt fit the application more. So yeah.
Yeah. Darren has his hand up, so, and then we'll get to the questions in the chat. Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that there is no chronological requirement. That would be too limiting. The idea, I think, of narrativizing or giving kind of sensual or physical kind of properties, those things, that's a creative part. That is a kind of telling and a specificity in its own right. So to force it to be chronological would disadvantage the students. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, great. Okay, we've got another question from Bree. My understanding is that we can only submit 10 images. Were some of those images detail shots? So either one of you use detail shots?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, detail shots, they can be so beautiful with just those small little tiny particulars and whatever work you have. So
yeah,
I definitely had like 3 detail shots.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yep. Sarah, did you have any?
I had only 1 to 2, but I think they help see the work in a better way because it is all online. And it's all digital, the way that the work is being shown.
Mm-hmm.
So having those close-ups can show the physicality a little better.
Okay. Emma has a question. She asks, would you say you framed your portfolio as a narrative? Also, did you incorporate drawing/images of what the exhibit may look like in your proposal? Did you both submit 10 pieces or did you submit less than 10? So we've got a couple questions in there. So the first one being, would you say you framed your portfolio like a narrative? So the images.
I would say I didn't as much, but I sort of paid attention to the relationship from the one to the next and how they related to each other that way.
Okay, so the sequence was important, how they flowed.
Yeah, and how they talk to each other next to each other visually.
Yeah, okay, great. How about you, Beck?
Yeah, I can kind of say the same thing. You know, there's maybe kind of like a slight narrative in the back of my head, but that more so played into how each image fed into the next.
Yeah. So you're really being mindful of how they're moving through them sequentially.
Yeah. Sequence
Great.
was a big factor.
Yeah. Okay. So Emma's second question is, did you incorporate drawings/images of what your exhibit may look like in your proposal? So a kind of maybe SketchUp, or did you do something that specific?
I didn't do anything that specific as to like draw out how my work might look like in the furlong.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think a lot of your past work kind of, details how your future look may look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. Go ahead, Sarah. How about you?
Well, I knew that I wanted 4 4x8 panels, and that's really all I knew about the visual element. I guess the portfolio for me was more about the content and sort of the why.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I would answer Emma's second question a little bit too. I think you can, it could be that you do submit something like that as an image because it makes sense for your work. But I would say the one thing that you want to try and think about is, are there specific things that you've already made that embody that? Maybe there's not, so you do need to do that. But I think yeah, as Beck noted, your work can do that for you, and you don't also want to hem in the jurors' ideas about your work, right? If you fence them in, I mean, proposals have done that. They've collapsed on themselves because they've given too much. So, and then the last part of Emma's question is, did you both submit 10 pieces or did you submit less than 10?
10, definitely 10.
Yeah.
I would say if I did not submit 10, I should have, because submitting 10 definitely guarantees your spot more than 8 will, because you might have those 2 that maybe you weren't expecting to be something that put you over the edge, but maybe the jurors do. Maybe that's all it took, is those other 2 images.
Mm-hmm. And it could go the other way though too, right? Like the 2 images that you thought you should stick in are the 2 that are like, what the hell are they thinking? Right? I mean, I think it's different. I think it's an important oh, I see. I'll just shut up and let Cynthia has her hand up for a long time, and then we'll get to Bree's question. So Cynthia, thanks for your patience. Sorry.
No problem. So I was just wondering if you could both speak a little bit more about how you selected your faculty mentors, because I know that part of this is working closely with faculty. So if you could just talk about any advice you have for students that are looking to incorporate the faculty mentorship as part of their application.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, when they consider who to select as their faculty mentors, they kind of think about their studio professors that they're closest with. But I kind of tried to frame it as like I picked one professor that I was closer with, and maybe someone else who was a little bit newer to my work, right? Get some fresh perspectives in there. And then also, it definitely doesn't have to be your studio professors either. It can be your art history professors as well.
Yeah. For me, I had a lot of classes with Dr. Bland, but of course, Dr. Bland I actually chose as one of my mentors, but because she's in art history, you know, there's a lack of being able to see all of my studio work and being critiqued. So I found that was a really awesome way to get an art historical perspective on a lot of things like that. And also being able to apply artists to my research was very important. You even mentioned Francis Bacon, and that's someone that we've talked about a lot, and I've actually done some more research about him within the residence. And then the other mentor, another one who had never really seen my studio work. So I actually picked 2 mentors who they had seen some of my work, but I never had a studio class with either of them at that point. So it was risky, I think, in that way. Mm-hmm. But it really did pay off because I did get these new perspectives involved. Yeah.
Great.
And then, also by involving other faculty, you're actually getting them on your team so that they can advocate for you. So I think that that's part of the process too, is picking a mentor that you know will really advocate for you when we have the faculty decision meetings at the end of the semester.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, both of you. Great job.
Yeah. Yeah, and a great question, Cynthia, because I think you're right. It is important that faculty get behind you. I mean, if any of you have intentions, anybody in the audience who has intentions for going to graduate school, these are the kinds of relationships that you need to build in order to have recommendations that are not just these banal rubber stamped kind of recommendations, that they're actually meaningful. So yeah, they can be quite powerful. Even if you don't get the residency, it can still be powerful. Those initial building blocks of a relationship definitely have begun. So that's very powerful. Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
I also just wanted to add that I think that having them read my proposal before I turned it in helped me a lot. That I would say, like, your mentors can be really helpful in having you get like Dr. Bland was saying, having people behind you, and that it helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It also could be interesting to have a mentor be outside of the School of Art and Design. So say if you have a science professor you're really close with, or some kind of like literature professor you're really close with, I think they can still apply for your faculty mentor, right?
Yeah, we've got two fabulous musicians, so they could be really interesting. Yeah, there's a whole host of faculty that are out there that mostly go untapped. So it's a really great comment and great question. Bree has a question in the chat. As an animation major, a lot of my work comes in a video format. How would you recommend submitting video content in a way that's cohesive with the rest of the proposal? Any thoughts on that? I might also hear from Darren on this. He might know too. But do either one of you have thoughts about that?
Well, I think as a part of my proposal, right, video was involved in that. So I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think you're limited to 3 video works in your image list. So those, I feel as though, are pretty essential to have in there to show that kind of range.
And you could have stills from it too to help. Yeah.
If it's like an installation as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Darren. Come on in.
In terms of the video, you do have three video pieces that can be included at a maximum length of 3 minutes. I suppose the notion of cohesive is the representative image. It's required that there is a still that then has a link to the video, and I would just say that there is a benefit of knowing that it doesn't have to be slick, in a way, like that. Sometimes there's no really incredibly slick way unless you embed and get into those layers, but that's not required. That's the kind of evenness of the process. So an image, a representative image with a link that takes us out, that's all you need. You don't have to bend over backwards to try to get to animate literally as we turn the page. I think that's that kind of level of designing is great, yes, but it not necessary. We see the content of the work. And Bree, I can always chat with you more about particular requirements, and maybe even after this, I'll still talk about some of those things. But yeah, animation, absolutely, 3 of them, 3 minutes max. Representative image, and then link outside of, so it's a YouTube Vimeo kind of thing.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, and I would just add to that, Bree, that you also may want to write about the work, those videos, in the proposal. Like if they're that important, and you feel like they're not going to be well represented within that, I think you can talk about them and be more direct, be more didactic with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with overestimating a little bit that your reader, viewer is not going to get what you want. And so I think that's something to consider. Hazel has a question. Do images have to be from classwork, or can the work be from outside school? And say definitely outside of school. It can be anything you want. You could have made it 10 years ago or the day before the proposal's due. Hazel's got another question. Yeah. Go ahead, Darren.
Sorry, it's slightly off topic, but that was actually done before. Cheyenne Seeley actually submitted like one of her high school pieces, and she was a resident. So, but she was a bit of a trickster. So,
Yeah.
but
Right.
I would aim for less of going into the back catalog, and certainly adjacent work to what you're doing right now. But definitely, any good work is good work.
Hazel asks another question: if submitting a comic, should one choose just the best page or two? Best page or two to add to the image list? Does the rest of the context need to be provided?
I would say if the comic is maybe essential to the proposal, then maybe include more of it. But I would say be mindful that having a sense, some multiplicity in the work can show the jurors that you're open to many avenues in that way. And I think that is sort of desired, to be open in that way.
Yeah, I think that's well stated. You know, if you show 5 of your 10 images of that comic, that could really truncate what the faculty can see of your work. So maybe there's 2 spreads, and then maybe you talk about that particular comic in the proposal potentially, and point it out. But I think Sarah's right. Like you do want multiplicity. You do want some variety. 10 images isn't a lot. Any other questions? We're almost done here. So Emma asks, would comics with moving components be counted as movies? It'd be a video. Pretty sure of that. Could I show one sample image from the comic and have a link to the full comic? It's not very long, similar to a movie. Darren, do you know what the length of the video is?
It'll just be a 3-minute. Yeah, if it's gonna get cut at 3, you got to cut it at 3. It's not even and again, we need it cut at 3. It isn't just I stop looking at 3. Okay, that's a professional practice. Don't just give me a 10-minute video and I'll close my eyes at minute 259.99. It's cut it down to 3. But that would be fine. A representative image of a still of that, and then we take move it to that. I mean, in a way, you luck out in that one small place, right? Your still image, I can look at it and see multiple images. My guess is because it's like a comic panel. But at the end of the day, it's still a still image, right? And then it links to a video. So, but just make sure that that's under the requirement of the 3 minutes.
Yeah, and she adds to it. It's not a 3-minute video. It's an interactive website that doesn't take long to read. It's kind of very in-between space.
Yeah, that's an in-between space, and I think that is such a kind of bespoke thing that you might want to just reach out to me, and then probably an agreement will be made by the committee of how we kind of address looking at that piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great, thanks, Darren. Any other questions? We've just got a couple minutes left. Anybody else have something that they specific needs to be worked out? Now's the time to ask. So the proposal is due on April 9th, is that correct, Darren?
Bingo. 3 p.m.
Yep, 3 p.m. Okay. All right, well, if there aren't other questions, I want to thank Sarah Campbell and Beck Slack for their time. Really great to hear your thoughts about what's been going on, and so looking forward to seeing the exhibition. Like, wow, really builds anticipation towards this. So very exciting. Congratulations to both of you.
I'm super excited, you guys. I can't wait.
That sounds like Daniel.
Yeah.
And I
Thank you.
look forward to working with both of you too very soon in the furlong.
Thanks for a great conversation. That was awesome. That was really enlightening. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
I noticed it was more informational than the sabbatical informational that we get to attend, which was nice. So
I love it. Very good. All right. Well, good night, everybody. See you soon.
Just a
Yes.
quick thing. I will hang out for like 15 minutes just to take some more kind of, nuts and bolts questions. Okay. I do have a little one, so I can't stay too much longer, but I will hang out for 15 minutes if you want to ask me some more questions.
Great.
But if no one's going to ask, then I will just leave.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thanks, Darren.
Yep. Thank you, Charlie.
All right. I'm going to head out. See you soon, folks. Bye-bye.
If it's specifics and about like a particular submission that if it's so specific that it doesn't extend its utility out to other students, then I think I'll just address it privately with you in a one-to-one.
Okay, I'll email you about that then. I do have one question that might kind of apply. I guess, so let's say you have a comic that's like one or two, or I guess like, I have one comic that's not even broken the pages, you just kind of keep scrolling. So I guess what I'm thinking is would I try to take like one or two images from that, and then would that count as 10 or 2 out of 10 images?
Yeah, the scroll is a tricky. I did this once for an application where I really liked the way I documented my work on a web page. And what I did is I did actually just kind of cut the chunks, if you will, almost Damien Hirst style, like chick, and then you kind of turn those in. Now, for that, I would urge that you really think about sequence. So if you put that out of sequence, that's really effed, But if it's like number 2, 3, and 4, if you chose 3 of those kind of scrolls, we do look at the images in order that you present them to us. We don't scramble them or anything. So that would be a case where we could sequence that.
Okay. So if I take that, because I do have one that I have a version of it that's broken down for this kind of stuff. And so I guess I just don't want to accidentally, over submit the amount of images.
Well, you can't. I mean, there's 10. It's 10 files. If you can't find yourself accidentally, putting an 11th one in. Now, of course, comics is different. That it's going to be, per page. Like a comic thing is a page. I'm not talking about individual images in cells, if you will, or panels. So with the website, I would just make sure you're cropping it so like the browser bar and stuff is not on there. But then you crop that, and if there's 1,000 images in there, that's still one image because it will be understood as a comic.
Okay. So, but no, I mean, so it'll be 3 pages, and that will count as 3 of my 10 images.
Yep, it would. I mean, again, I just threw out 3, but I mean, yeah, that would count.
Okay.
And I think Professor Lume is right in the sense that in our comics, it's difficult because I'm just going to tell you right now, the speed in which people analyze this, particularly in a contemporary art context, and I get messed with because I do a lot of writing too, so I sympathize, is that I really wouldn't go much more than 2. I think, because there's the duration that we have to read them, the time. I think it'd be better to give, 5 2-page, snippets of each thing, rather than giving me something 3, 4, or 5 pages. That you're putting a ton on us liking that one thing in a big way. And it's in a slightly different way than, say, an installation that goes into a detail. I would say I can just imagine, again, remember the overall illiteracy of comics as well by the panel. Just going to be honest with you. And not on my sense, but there's other people that might not have as much literacy of comics. But I can see that sometimes you might say, oh, that's a bad installation shot, but then they get a detail shot and they go, oh, I really like that because, as Beck said, the texture is beautiful and it's pretty. Comics, you're gonna like, you could get some unique new ways of kind of presenting imagery or presenting sequence. But I think that it feels different. It feels like a sequence of film. It's still inside that way of reading, where I feel sometimes installation versus detail images of a visual work, it almost feels like they've turned into completely different forms of visual presentation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm just saying that I really think you might think that, this story or this conversation between these characters, like, it's super important that it continues on. But I would just really be skeptical of what you think is important but instead just showing a range. I think showing us a range via your kind of comics and animation, I think that's going to be ultimately, and let me look here. Let me look. Is it just between you and me right now? It looks like it is. I really think that's a better angle. I really think you shouldn't go for depth. You should go for breadth, and show us the vernacular and the range that you have in terms of comics and sequential and animation image, kind of artwork. I really think that you're going to play with fire to expect a panel that is very much, painter, an art historian, a ceramicist, to be able to kind of deep dive into the literacy that you have.
Okay.
I want you to succeed, so I'm just trying to help you out there. Okay?
Yeah. So with that in mind, I mean, I have some paintings I can include too. Like, that's the other.
Don't pander though. Don't pander though. That's the biggest thing. Don't pander in that way. It's just understand the threshold of attention that is going to be highly bracketed, because we do this on our own time. We don't get paid. We do it and we come in and, so there is it's not like we rush through it, but we don't, it's hard to know how much people are doing. Like, I might try to read your comic and my daughter's on my leg, trying to get me. So I just think you should consider the breadth of, and it's not being superficial, but it is just about being to the point and having a certain agenda inside each of these pages, not hoping that, people are going to extend that attention very far. I think 2 makes sense for continuity. I really think 3, 4 is very dangerous in terms of that. But that doesn't mean then you just say, oh, I don't want to be, I'm a comics person, and obviously then I'm just like fucked and I won't have as much of a chance. No, don't pander. Like, you should really make us sit in our seats and have to understand the integrity and accept the quality of what you want us to see. Not trying to go, oh, Tim paints, I'm going to make a painting in there. Okay?
All right.
Stick to your guns. I saw one of your images that you submitted for your Prometheus, and I really thought it was fun.
Oh, thank you. Wow, I can't believe that got accepted. I
thought it was wild in all sorts of ways. So I enjoyed it for what it was.
Oh man, thank you.
Yeah. Anyways, I gotta get going though.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'll email you.
Yeah. Email me. We'll throw something together. It's more just, I can't look at it though. That's the issue. I can't see it.
Oh crap. Okay.
Right? I can't see it. I can't do that. That's gonna get in trouble.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess what I'll do, I'll talk with Amy about it.
Talk with Amy about it. I will also run it by the committees, since we know that we're expecting it. And what I think, since it's probably going to be an isolated case where it's just your thing, in this case, probably you'd run into a harder situation. I could see us putting a timer on and looking at that and having it timed, because there has to, but the downside is, as a committee, we might say, we're not going to look at it individually by ourselves, on our own time, because we could just cheat and look at the whole thing. That might be a piece that we then just, in the moment of the actual jurying, we look and assess this piece, and then have to re-report our judgments or something. I don't know. But we'll figure it out.
I'm just gonna say right now, I know for a fact you can read it under 3 minutes, because I had to read it out loud for comics class. I had to present it. It's really short.
Then just state that, then you get out of less trouble just to say, this has been tested, or something, this reads under 3 minutes by an average, you don't have to get too pedantic, but you can, in the more information, when you're, you can always put a little blurb of extra information on on that page, on a link, and you could say, I have, tested this with, 5 different readers, and everyone has, been able to get through it for 3 minutes. I mean, that it's a little bit like extra more information, but it is a way for you to show that you've done your due diligence and you are abiding by the integrity and the kind of standard of the application process.
Okay.
Well,
Alright,
then,
yeah.
so that would seem like then it's much easier not to get too into the weeds about it then.
Okay.
If I trust you in that way. That's not me being biased. I trust you, and I can confess to my colleagues that you can be trusted. And if you think that we can read this in 3 minutes, then send it to us.
All right. Yeah,
Well-
I feel like because it's something that's like the panels individually, like sure they look okay, but when they're out of context, I mean they really don't make sense. It's literally like we're talking about the single panels. It's the single panels, and like sure you could probably fit most of them onto 2 pages, but it's
I
meant
get
to be that you click a button or scroll through it to read
Yep.
them.
Yep, it's interactive. It's an interactive piece. Understood. All right, I gotta go, Emma. But yeah, I think then that's settled. I don't think we even need to meet anymore.
Okay.
It's settled. Just trust and just kind of give us a little bit of framing on that image for that page, that submission. Just give us a little bit of framing information in the image list. Put that underneath, so you have like the title, the materials. Just put a little kind of blurb that tells us about that in the image list.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, see you later.
All right, see you. Bye-bye.